Good afternoon and welcome to our webcast with SA Partners on Coaching Through Disruption. I'm Heather Marsh from the Chartered Banker Institute. This webinar will help you learn the basic principles of well-being and resilience. You will also learn more about the nature of the Covid-19 crisis and the profound effect that it will have on management practices going forward. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the online function to submit these and Keivan will try his best to answer these. I hope you enjoyed today's webcast and I'll now hand you over to Keivan.
Hello and good afternoon, or in fact good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on wherever you are in this now increasingly globalized and virtual world. So it's a great pleasure to be with you. My name is Keivan Zokaei and with me is my colleague Gordon Dow from SA Partners. I'm a partner at SA Partners and head of financial services. Previously, I used to be a university professor at University of Cardiff and at the center which was the birthplace of lean thinking, the Lean Enterprise Research Center. I began about 17, 18 years ago my career in the world of lean and continuous improvement, and before that I was an engineer in the oil and gas industry. So I've been using the science of well-being, or as psychologists like to refer to it, positive psychology, over the past 7 years or so. And during the past 2-3 months, I have been increasingly using that in my day-to-day life personally, and with my clients and coachees. So I thought it might be a good idea to use some of that today and discuss some of that together today. Now, it's a great pleasure to have you with us. And without any further ado, this is Coaching Through Disruption, or Coaching Through Crisis, if you like. And I am going today to talk about a little bit about where we're standing post-coronavirus, or as some like to refer to it, AC, after coronavirus, and the importance of having the right culture organizationally to face the crisis. Now, as I said, we want to look into the science of well-being and positive psychology and how to use that as a framework to coach ourselves and our colleagues and peers and our team members through this disruption. We'll discuss some practical tips. With us, we will have two distinguished guests, Tina Morris, Chief Operating Officer at S&P Global, and Dina Patel, Head of Lean and Agile at S&P Global. So they will join us hopefully shortly. And at the end, we'll have some time for some Q&A. So feel free to send in your questions as we go through. Now, but first of all, where are we really standing? You might have read The Black Swan by Nassim Taleb. He was the person who predicted the previous crisis. And he coined the term the Black Swan, the unexpected events that come out of the blue. And these are completely outside of the realm of regular expectations. They have extreme impacts and they can only be retrospectively rationalized. So this was another Black Swan event that occurred, the coronavirus. A lot of organizations around the globe walked right into it. I have to say that SA Partners, my company, we were not prepared for this. I have to say that personally, I was not prepared for this. Even after this happened in China, and I personally was sitting there and thinking, well, this is going to go big, unfortunately, and it is going to have huge ramifications, even though on a rational level I knew, and I discussed it with my relatives and friends, that this is unfortunately going to have huge implications. And on a rational level, I could understand it. But even so, I was unprepared on a personal and emotional level for it. So Black Swan events as such. They happen because we have blindness for them. And why do we have blindness for them? Well, there are all sorts of reasons, but a lot of it is deep-rooted into human psychology and the so-called tunneling effect. So we only look for the events that reaffirm our own theories. It's called confirmation bias. We know that the silent evidence don't reach us. So there is the fallacy of the silent evidence. So, for example, during the Second World War, we looked at the planes that were coming back from going over Nazi Germany and coming back, and looked at the bullet holes they were receiving. And actually, we tried to reinforce the body armor around the pattern of where the bullet holes were. But in fact, the planes that never returned, those were the real pattern for the bullet holes, the real holes on the body, on the fuselage of the planes that never return. And we call those the silent evidence, the events that we don't see or we felt around. And they're actually the important ones. So generally, we're not programmed as human beings, we're not programmed for the Black Swan effect. So it's important to also admit that Nassim Taleb himself not only predicted this crisis too, he said that there will be a virus, a pandemic that will plague the world. But also, when he was asked whether he thinks this is another Black Swan event, he said no, because it was predictable. So I think it doesn't matter whether it was a Black Swan, a grey swan, or a white swan. What it was all the same. We were unprepared for it. Now, so we are in the realm of unknown unknowns, and there is a famous model in the world of knowledge management. You might know that SA Partners is a Welsh company, so quite appropriately, there is this model has got a Welsh name, Cynefin model, and it is probably one of the best-known models by David Snowden in the world of knowledge management. It talks about the different domains we're in. So we have the domain of simple, where the cause and effect between the relationship between the causes and effects are known. And I have found myself most of my career try to fight people not to always think in the simple domain, because a lot of instances you're in the world of complicated, where the cause and effect needs a lot more analysis to be understood. So you might know that my job is operational excellence. In operational excellence, we have some established tools and techniques, and a lot of my colleagues and peers and my clients would love to see something and jump into the conclusion that thinking, well, they have the best practice, so they can reapply it. And I found most of my career trying to fight that and say, well, no, there is no best practice. There is good practice. You need huge adaptations. You can't just apply your tools. That's a very tool-heavy thing to do. Do not apply tools. Adapt them before you apply them. Now, we are not in the world of complicated. We're not even in the world of complex. In this particular instance, talking about coronavirus, we're in the world of chaos, in the chaotic world. And how you react to events in any one of those domains is completely different. So in the world of best practice, we can just repeat using the same category of tools we have. In the world of complicated, we have to sense and analyze before we respond. In the world of complex, you want to probe, sense, and respond. In the world of chaos, you probably want to just go act first before analyzing. You don't need to analyze. There is no cause and effect to be analyzed. These are unprecedented events without any known causes yet. Therefore, the best action is to take action. And that's where we find ourselves. So it's important not to think in the domain of simple, complicated, or complex, but actually get used to quickly acting, sensing the result of our actions, and then adjusting or responding accordingly. Now, one important factor I want to share with you is the importance of having the right culture in the current circumstances. Now, we are seeing quickly that the companies who have the right culture are faring much better than the rest. So let's look at the common management practices I generally can refer to them as command and control, or sometimes we just call them modern management. And the key word in command and control is not so much commanding. It is actually the second word, is control. So what does it mean, command and control? In the world of command and control, the top of the organization solves the problems and makes the decisions and communicates that to the middle and the front. And the middle and front follow that and implement the solutions, if you like. So the thinking and the problem solving comes from the top, and the body and the middle will implement those. Now, there is an alternative to that that we can refer to as a continuous improvement organization. And in that world, the top of the organization doesn't see its role as finding the solutions, rather to give directions, pointing out the challenges and coaching the middle and the front line to actually find their own solutions. And if your organization is in the domain of command and control, it's likely that we have to wait for the top to make the decision and the body to follow. But if we have the muscle memory of continuous improvement, where the top of the organization has always just given the direction, and the body, the middle and the front, is very used to solving their own problems and not waiting for the top to tell them what to do, then you have a much more agile organization. Another word for that is maybe agile organization. And we have increasingly found ourselves in a world that companies where maybe I would say more than 90-95% of organizations are still in the world of command and control. However, during the past couple of months, 2-3 months, we've seen that the ones that were used to a culture of continuous improvement are doing a lot better. So in other words, the crisis is separating the chaff from the wheat. That's what's happening. Now, you may ask me what to do. Well, I say, we start your own journey of creating the culture of continuous improvement as soon as you can. And by the way, it's not that difficult. It does need rethinking, but it's not by any means a difficult thing to do. It's about tapping into everyone's talents. And now talking about the crisis itself, remember that a little bit of stress is not necessarily a bad thing. These emotions have been designed in human DNA over millennia to prepare us for the right response. In fact, momentary stress is absolutely okay. The problem is when stress becomes prolonged, and that is the biggest problem. So resilience is about turning that feeling of stress into performance. Managing that stress so that we can effectively optimize our own performance, engagement, and focus. And that's what we're talking about here. So in order to understand how to do that better, I probably need to tell you briefly about the science of well-being. During the past 10 years or so, a body of science has emerged in the field of psychology that is very different from the old psychology, because the old psychology was concerned with the science of curing neurosis. So if anybody is having psychosis problems, neurosis problems, such as depression or similar, psychology was there to help. But then it ignored the vast majority of the human population that did not have neurosis, but actually needed to go from 0 to 100 to improve. And that science now has finally, at long last, emerged in the past 10-15 years by the leading psychologists in the world. It's the self-help books of the 1980s and 1990s with actual science behind it, which makes it incredibly powerful. And organizations around the world are rapidly adopting positive psychology as a very important mechanism. It is about the percentage of time that our brain, your brain, my brain, is serving us as opposed to sabotaging us. It's interesting because our own brain, the same way it can serve us, it can also sabotage us. And that for psychology is an indicator of how much mastery we have over our own brain to make it serve us. Sometimes we refer to it as mindfulness or self-awareness or self-consciousness. Now, bear in mind, and this is the powerful realization, that happiness is actually an inside game. You may have heard the story of Viktor Frankl or read his famous book, Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl was a renowned psychologist in the 1930s, and he ended up in concentration camps because he was Jewish. That was his only fault. And so he went through excruciating pain of tolerating Auschwitz and Dachau and places like that. And he came out with a lot of personal growth. And he was basically maybe the father of this field of scientific self-help. And he said there's a moment between stimulus and response, and in that moment lies our power. We choose our own response, and in that response lies our growth and freedom. Now, by the way, well-being, or sometimes simply referred to as happiness, but we have to distinguish between happiness and cheerfulness, and that's a very important distinction there. Well-being is different things for different people. So for some people, it's about positive emotions, pleasures. We all know that, to go on a nice holiday and so on and so forth. And for someone else, it might be what they do, what they engage in day out. So some people love their job and they get a real sense of satisfaction out of what they do. They love their hobbies or their jobs. The people who do extremely difficult tasks for no physical reward. So the people who climb tall mountains, they don't do it because they get any sort of external recognition for it or any financial reward whatsoever. They do it because they absolutely enjoy it. They do it for the engagement in the task. And some people are like that with their own jobs. And there are elements within our jobs, all of us, that we are like that about. Some of the people's well-being lies in their own relationships. In the relationship with my family, I have a 4-month-old baby, so you can imagine that gives me a lot of happiness and satisfaction. And some other people's well-being lies in the search for meaning, religion, meditation, spirituality. It could be structured religion, or it could be any sort of spirituality. And last but not least, some people's happiness or well-being comes from their achievements. They are collecting the next degree, and they do it because they enjoy having those achievements. They put the next recognition on their CV. They might they get the next promotion, and they're not doing it for the extra money, but they actually love their promotion. So we have to recognize, and this is essential, that we recognize that different people's well-being lies in different things, and these are important to recognize amongst us when we're coaching other people, to recognize that they might get a sense of satisfaction from very different dimension of well-being. And now that we know these aspects, let's look at some of the practical tips that we can use to coach ourselves and our colleagues and our friends and our family through these difficult times. So first off, we started by admitting that these are unprecedented times. This is a Black Swan event. Then we went on to talk about the importance of understanding what domain we're in. We're in the domain of unknown unknowns. And in the domain of unknown unknowns, how you act and how you react is very different from the domain of simple, complicated, or complex. Then we went on to talk about the importance of your company culture, how those companies who have invested in years of creating a culture of continuous improvement are faring much better. I'm hoping later on today we have now Dina and Tina with us. I'm hoping that in our conversation with Tina and Dina, they can tell us more about that, so you hear it from the horse's mouth. And then we talked about well-being a little bit and how we can use that for our day-to-day betterment, if you like, and getting ourselves through this unprecedented times. Now, my tip number one, and I've tried to summarize these into 9 or 10 quick tips. My tip number one is measure your own grit. I mean, you've got very robust scientific mechanisms developed by the best universities in the world, the Yale and the UPenn and the Harvard of the world, systems, psychometric tests that allow you to measure your own resilience. What's your grittiness as of today? To measure it, target the next level, improve, and repeat. It's an old saying in the world of operational excellence that if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So I would start by understanding my own resilience. And it probably takes 10 minutes to do. At the end of this presentation, there's a link. You can quickly go and spend your own 10 minutes over lunch break or whatever you like and do that. Where am I? And maybe we should all do that. Maybe we should encourage our family, our friends to do this. And by the way, by simply going through the questions, it opens up our eyes to a lot of possibilities. So that would be my starting point. Now, the second one, and there is consensus amongst the scientists who are, in this field of positive psychology, that creating conscious and positive routines, having those healthy habits, is a massive booster to our well-being, especially when we're going through hardships like this. So I imagine me, Keivan, who is always traveling. I'm normally on a plane traveling somewhere, and suddenly there is a lockdown, and I am stuck in a tiny apartment in the central London, in a tiny room. Very quickly, I had to take my own medicine and realize that there is no way I can get through this unless I design better routines for myself. So I had to get up a bit early in the morning and do an hour of my own ritual. There was a second project that I had to attend to. It was a very important project that we had. I had to do that between, let's say, 7 and 8 o'clock before I could start my 8 o'clock daily routine that I always had. And I had to work heavily on my healthy eating and my physical exercise daily or every other day, and my walks or my runs because I couldn't go to the gym. But make sure that you actually write them down and you create your own routine, whatever helps you. And remember that little changes, very small changes, go a very long way. And I mean, there's not enough time to talk about the importance of routines. But there is one rule that most psychologists agree on, and we know it from science, from research, that there is a 21-day rule. So if you want something to become a habit, remember the magic number, 21 days. So you have to have 21 iterations or repetitions of it. Now, the third tip, if you like, is nurturing relationships. Remember that one of the key dimensions of well-being, and that is absolutely true for nearly everybody, is our relationships, our friends and our family. It's extra difficult in a lockdown to nurture our relationships. So this is a real catch-22. But let me give you maybe a surprising bit of information there. And that is about the 4 a.m. rule. So there is a single yes-no question that scientists know. This was research done by Harvard University. The scientists know that they can ask people that can reliably predict whether people live to the age beyond the age of 80 and they will have a happy life. And that yes-no question, simple yes-no question is, do you have a friend or family member that you feel comfortable you can call up at 4 a.m. in the morning? And you can confide in them about something difficult, or you can share with them something personal, calling them up 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, in the world of social distancing, we are talking about nurturing your relations. But of course, there are ways to do that. We can keep the 2 meter or 6 feet distance. We can use technology to do that, and so on and so forth. But consciously making sure that we do that. Now, the fourth step, if you like, is about, this is a technique we use. We call it creating your own story. Imagine it's a decade on from today, or maybe 15 or 20 years on from today, and you are looking back and you want to tell your story about today to your own children or to some youngster that is around you. And you better be, and you're going to be very honest and tell them the exact truth, the story as you've written it down, as it exactly happened today. So you better be creating a very good story. You better have a wonderful story to tell them. To use that imagination, that situation you put yourself in a decade or more from today, and you're going to tell that story to a youngster. Now, the next step is about counting our blessing. Again, the scientists know from research, and there's been a ton of research done on this. They know that by simply counting our blessings, we enhance our level of well-being. 3 things that run well today. Every day before sleep, count the 3 things that run well today, or the 3 things that I'm grateful for generally in my life, for my health, for my family's health, and so on and so forth. It's incredible that by the simple act of counting our blessings, and of course there is a long history of that in religion and in spirituality of doing exactly that, but it's incredible that by doing that simple act we boost our well-being reliably and predictably. Now, there is a technique that I've used for a long time. It's called the gratitude visit. So I used to ask my colleagues, my friends, to go and visit someone they're grateful to, but they haven't had the chance to express that gratefulness. Go visit them in person, and so write a letter, go visit them in person, and read that letter to them in person. You have to basically embarrass them. You have to go to their doorstep and knock on the door, and they open the door, and read your gratitude letter to them. It's called the gratitude visit, and you have to have at least 2 of these. And when you do that, again, research shows that significantly boosts your happiness or well-being score. It is even more difficult in the time of coronavirus. It's not good enough to email anyone, so we have compromised on write your gratitude letter, Skype them or Zoom them, and read that letter to them. And finally, Shizat Shamin, a well-known thinker in the field of well-being, has set us a challenge, set the world a challenge. And the challenge is the so-called positive outcome scenario. How would you turn this crisis into a positive scenario? It is tough. People are losing their lives. It's very difficult. So the bigger the crisis, the bigger the response required. And if you're suffering and if you're grieving, look at the pain that you're going through and set yourself an intention or a goal, which is relative to the size of the pain, of course. And you want to look back a number of years from now. You want to look back and you say that it was worth it, that actually this was a gift in disguise. I know it's difficult, but we just talked about Viktor Frankl, who ended up in concentration camps. That's as bad as it gets, ladies and gentlemen. And well, we have the story of Christopher Reeves, the old Superman actor, who became quadriplegic. And he wrote a book, and he went on explaining to the world that was actually the best thing that had happened to him in his life. He turned it into a positive outcome. It's called the gift of intention, if you like. Now, there's a good old saying that let's not let a crisis go to waste. I think Winston Churchill said it, in fact, during the war. And last but not least, coaching tip number 8. And that is to let go. And that's probably the most difficult of all. To let go of the things that we have been so close to and so used to, so for many years, and now there's a crisis and we can't do those, perform those things, or or enjoy those things, and we're very attached to them, and we need to let go. And of course, that's not easy. It's easier said than done. So I used to ask people to meditate, my colleagues and my coaches, and we know that meditation it's not always easy, although these days it's become much more accessible with these apps. If you can do it, it only needs 10 minutes a day. But if you can't do meditation, short of meditation, there are some activation techniques, and they are very simple. I'll explain to you in a few seconds now. And you need to do these techniques about 100 repetitions a day, and each repetition is only about 10 seconds. So that's in total about 15 minutes throughout the day, not in one go. You can spread it out. And you want to focus on your physical senses. So if you're sitting down, just clear your mind a little bit and feel your weight on the sole of your feet. if you're sitting in front of a desk, put your palms on the desk in front of you and feel the weight of your hands on your palms. And if you're sitting on a chair, just on your seat, feel your weight on the seat, and so on and so forth. Or you can listen to the humming noise. Just clear your mind a little bit and listen. Focus on the humming noise that's coming from the computer, or any other of these physical senses, a smell or a sound or a sense of touch or any of those. By doing that for about 10 seconds and repeating that around 100 times, that comes exactly to 16 minutes a day. If you did that for 21 days, it is proven that you significantly boost your well-being level. That's short of meditating. So of course meditation is always the preferred option, and that often leads to meditating. So those are my tips for coaching ourselves through the crisis. Some very practical tips to tap into this science of well-being, and we've seen remarkable results. I know that organizations around the world are using these. Organizations are promoting meditation during the crisis. They are actually using a lot of the tips that we talked about, the structuring that and giving that to the employees. And I'm hoping that maybe your company is doing that, so please use it. Otherwise, you can create it for yourself and for your colleagues and for your team. Now, without any further ado, I would like to first briefly introduce Tina and Dina. I've had the pleasure of working with both of them for a number of years now. So Tina Morris, Chief Operating Officer at S&P Global Ratings, and Dina Patel, Head of Performance Excellence at S&P Global Ratings. And thank you for joining us, Tina and Dina. Would you like to first say a few words? I think you're mute, by the way.
Oh, yes. Hi, this is Tina.
Hi, Tina.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thanks for having us today, and I've been enjoying the content so much. It's really great to keep framing everything with the positive mindset.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Tina. Thank you for your time. I know how busy you are, and it's your early morning in New York, in like London in the lockdown, and thank you for your time. So, Dina, so I think you're with us too. Good afternoon to you.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having us. And it's really exciting to be here. And thanks, Keivan, for the content. It's definitely interesting to remind ourselves about how important some of this positive psychology and sort of coaching are through this time.
Wonderful. I know that S&P Global has been great at a lot of these things, so I will come to those in a minute. But first, maybe, Tina, you would like to, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about S&P, your division, the ratings division, S&P's response to COVID-19. What were some of the things you had to do? I know you've done great and very many different great things you've done.
Oh, sure. And thanks for the opportunity to talk a little bit about how S&P has been essentially, in my view, first and foremost, taking care of our employees. And I think that's the theme that I have this morning, and why I feel very proud of how our organization has been navigating this very challenging period, because first and foremost, we put people first. And what's been very interesting for me to watch, and as you know, I'm a chief operating officer, so I'm an operations person, and logistics and tactics and execution is how I live. And what's been so interesting, and I've been involved in crisis management throughout my career. I have a military background, so I've done different forms of crisis management in different contexts. And what's been so interesting to me about this situation is how many organizations really had their people organizations or their human resources organization take the lead on their responses, as this has been a health crisis. And it has made a big difference, in my view, in the tone and the texture of how we've approached it. And so for us, our people organization has really set that right tone. And so that's why I go back to people first. A few other key principles, I think, that have led us to sort of be very focused on a very thoughtful path throughout this is, first of all, people first and everyone's health and wellness and situations is number one. The second is really using facts. You're kind of facts first, or, really leveraging, what's really going on. And you mentioned before kind of the chaotic feel people have. I do think when the companies can communicate with facts, it's very helpful for folks. It gives them an anchor point. The third big kind of principle we've had is really communicating around infrastructure and what is the information, the data that we have mean for our kind of infrastructure and how we're living, and how would that impact how we work. The fourth is really trying to minimize disruption and try to run our business operations as effectively as we can virtually. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, because at the end of the day, we have to run our operation. And the fifth item, and this has been a principle we've just added recently, is to reimagine. And as we are continuing to plan for returning to office and post-pandemic, how are we changing and evolving from how we've experienced this situation? And so that's exciting and scary all at the same time. But I'll stop in a second. I'll just say the last thing that's been very important, I think, for our success, and it goes back to the people first, is leading with empathy. And our president has said this in a number of forums. And I think as leaders, we're all trying to live that. And some days it's harder than others because we are dealing with a lot of our own personal challenges and how we're navigating it. But I think that's really resonated, because that is what we need right now, is understanding that there's layers of stress every single employee and team member have right now that we may or may not understand. And going into every situation with a feeling of compassion and empathy, and having patience and self-awareness and being authentic in the moment with people is what I think makes the difference in circumstances like this. And if you are creating those conditions, then you can do everything else you need to do, because people need to feel safe first. So I'll stop there, but that's a little bit on our approach.
That is absolutely excellent. And Tina, what I have also noticed is that not only you had to deal with the crisis, but at the same time, your volume of work has gone through the roof for obvious reasons, because it's turbulent times in the market, and you regulate, your information for the market is extremely important. You have to publish a lot more. So isn't that true that not only you had to adapt to this massive change, but also your volume has gone through the roof?
Yes. It has. It's been up over 300% since March in terms of, between the surveillance and then, there has been a steady flow of issuance into the market given the conditions and the need for liquidity and where the rates are. But I will tell you another quick story, and I think this is important, and it goes to that fifth principle that I mentioned, which was reimagine. Yes. And it's that thinking of, how do we get stronger from this situation, and as we I know every day we're just trying to navigate getting through the day. I take it one day at a time, but on the back end of this, we want to be stronger as a company and as a community around this. And the story I'm going to tell you is so we pretty much flipped the switch on our two major hubs working virtually within the course of about 5 days. So right. London went full work from home about 5 or 6 days before New York did, because we had an infection case in Canary Wharf. And so, and we already had all of our Asia Pacific teams, kind of virtually working, but New York and London are big footprints. And we had, I said, like almost overnight, like 98.99% of our workforce working virtually and effectively. Just almost like I said, flipping a switch. And I believe that we were able to be that effective because we learned some other hard lessons from other crises. So I know many of you are not based in New York, but about 8 years ago, we had a very debilitating natural event. It was a big hurricane. It was Hurricane Sandy that knocked out our headquarters because it was located downtown and right on the water, and it flooded our office building. And we were out of our office building for 6 months. So that was pretty kind of a wake-up call, and this was, 2012? So I just remember that because it was the year my young daughter was born, so it's easy to remember. But that was a real wake-up call for us because we were not a company that was comfortable working virtually. We were very much in the office, see each other. We didn't have the technology infrastructure, and we had to navigate that crisis. And coming out of that, we really focused our business continuity and our technology infrastructure to very much change our capabilities. And people had to get comfortable working virtually because for 6 months, we had to be in swing space. We had to run the business differently. And New York being our headquarters, it really impacted a lot of the leadership and their thinking. So I would say in the last 8 years, we used those years well in upgrading our infrastructure. We've been using Zoom for years. I mean, everyone else is like, what's Zoom? We've been using Zoom for years. That's one of our enterprise architecture video conferencing capabilities. So I feel proud as an organization that we were a learning organization, and we became stronger from that event.
Fantastic. And just one little detail to add to that, I think you almost mentioned it, Tina, that the day that you sent 1,200 people or so home from London, we were not in a lockdown. We were maybe 2 weeks away from a lockdown, but you made this brave decision because you felt you were ready for it. And I think the markets were looking at you and thinking, oh, maybe we should learn from this a little bit. And the market maybe wasn't so sure how to react yet. But very soon, everybody had to adapt to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was very proud that we were making those early calls, and it was really quite fascinating. And like many of you, as I was living it through our Asia Pacific teams in January and February, but still very skeptical of really the full scale and extent of what it could be. And so you're right, for leaders to make those proactive choices is not easy. And you're right, they had an underlying confidence that we could do it.
That's wonderful. That was excellent. And if I may go to Dina, so we've heard this fantastic story from Tina. Dina, what role do you think your investment in this culture of continuous improvement played in your ability to adapt?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of parts to it. So as Tina alluded to, we've learned a lot over the last few years, both from sort of crises and situations we found ourselves in, but we've also had a very deliberate focus on creating a management system that's built around this idea of continuous improvement and lean. And across our organization, we've seen teams really embrace that, particularly over the last few months where we have had to think differently and operate differently. I think some of that muscle memory, that investment in time in actually helping build these systems has really paid off. So we're seeing teams sort of still continuing to have their daily huddles. They're leveraging sort of visual boards and things like that to help manage their operations. We've really got empowered teams who can raise issues quickly now, especially when they're not co-located or they're not together. So all of that investment and the time we spent really building those tools and capabilities and that mindset of continuing to improve what we do and reimagine, as Tina said, is really starting to pay dividends, I think, and it's been a big factor in just helping navigate these changes and be able to do them quickly, where we are all dealing with sort of personal issues at home and at work as well. I think the other part that's been a massive factor is what Tina alluded to earlier around leaders and the role of leaders in actually role modeling what we want to be able to see from our teams. It's actually been a great leveler. If you think about what's happened over the last few weeks and months, everybody is now in the same boat. Doesn't matter what position you have in a company, what role you play, we're all facing the same circumstances. And so having that culture of really having empowered, integrated teams, people trying to work together to resolve issues quickly, that's been incredibly helpful. Because now it's not about who's in the office, who's not, what team are you in, what team are you not. It's really about, look, we're all in this together. We're trying to figure it out together. How can we put our best foot forward and make it happen? And it's just made things normal. So it's normal to see kids on a conference call, right? It's very normal to see sort of people trying to manage their schedules in a more flexible way. And so I think the foundations of some of that culture that we built over the last few years has actually made that much more acceptable, and therefore it's easier for us to adapt.
Absolutely. I mean, so maybe the sixth principle that Tina talked about, compassion and empathy. So even more important, right, Tina, in that context. And I've seen your organization demonstrating that. If I may add one thing, is that I've seen, people I've been working with in your organization, how people have been taken care of. People have childcare issues or similar, and how S&P with compassion and empathy has been making sure that they're looked after as much as possible. Of course, it's difficult. We all recognize it, but what can the company do for those individuals? And well, I mean, you mentioned about these visual boards, Dina, that how powerful they've been, and you've been using them for a number of years, so you were well versed in them. Now, on the flip side, in some other recognized financial services names that we worked with, we had to jump in, of different sectors, of course, but we had to jump in, and last minute, after hundreds of people, thousands of people are working from home, we had to design it from scratch, because the visual management boards, either they were not there, or if they were there, they were not really as effective as they needed to be. And I've witnessed in your company how effective they were and how much they helped, I'm sure. I mean, as you just said, Dina.
Yeah, right. It's interesting, I think, to think about sort of the role of habits that you alluded to earlier, right, and routine, where we have been sort of using daily stand-ups, daily huddles as means to coordinate and prioritize around work. Those habits have actually, I think, been helpful for teams where they are facing lots of new information or new circumstances. Some of that muscle memory of knowing how to do that actually frees up brain space, right, to be able to deal with other things. So having that benefit of knowing what your routine is in terms of how you get work done with your team, and having the data and the facts, as Tina alluded to ensure that you're doing it, I think has actually been a big help, because it means you can use that brain power to deal with other things.
Absolutely, and that's bandwidth. Yeah. Wonderful.
And I will just add, having that system in our organization of the huddles and the rhythm. As a leader, one of the things I started to do once we went into this virtual working environment is every week, and I did this before, but not as regularly, I will admit. I've been joining people's huddles regularly, because it is an opportunity, an easy way for leaders to jump in and connect, hear how the teams are working through key work, where they're struggling with priorities, and as I said at the beginning, connect. So we already had the system in place. We didn't have to fabricate something and sort of struggle through it. It was already there and operating.
As you said, Tina, maybe you used those years leading to this crisis very wisely. You were already geared up for it. And yeah, maybe we didn't know exactly this crisis will happen, but you were very ready, weren't you?
We really were, and it's as Dina said. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure this is new information for most of you, but we went through a very rigorous lean rollout starting in 2014. So that was 2 years after we had this, the big Sandy event. We did 100% lean rollout, which was really critical to that moment for us as an organization to sort of starting to operate differently. And so years later now, it's 6 years later, the systems were in place. And so this was the crisis. This is the pandemic, but frankly, next year could be something else, hopefully not. But it's a system that is strong and it is very adaptable. It allows people to function effectively and leaders to be present with their teams.
Fantastic. Thank you for all of that information. Tina, I have another question for you, if you don't mind. I know that in S&P you are offering things even such as meditation to your team, coaching, meditation, those things. Maybe you would like, if you don't mind, share with us some of the community work you're doing, or I don't know if it categorizes on the supporting colleagues, supporting community. Can you tell us a bit more about that, please?
Sure. Like most people, every week I think there's a different set of emotions that everyone's been feeling. And, I know personally living in the New York area and seeing how devastated, some of our communities have been here in New York.
Yeah.
You wanted to feel like, what can I do to help? Like I'm doing what I can for my family. I'm staying inside. I'm not, kind of out and about, but how can I help others? And what I really did like about S&P Global is we have a very strong kind of corporate responsibility group, and they started sending out notes with all kinds of different organizations that you could, support virtually. And just like having that type of a resource on hand to go through and just as you're sitting there behind your computer and you're saying, how can I engage? How can I help? Some of it was obviously monetary help that people could give individually, but some of it was links, like where you could do more mentoring and help organizations that needed virtual support. So I thought that was really fantastic. And then other, we've been doing a lot of connecting on our internal hub site, and people just sharing stories about how they're supporting their communities. And, certainly in the New York area, a lot of huge thanks for our healthcare workers and our, our folks just supporting the community so it stays up and running, and people sharing their stories of how they're helping around that. So I think there's been a few different layers around support. I mean, at a very high level, we've been, giving our kind of endowments have been, giving money to different organizations to support them. But what I do think is the most powerful is on a personal level is people wanting to give right now, and our company having a resource center to sort of help them think through that. The second thing I'll mention on that topic is our senior leaders are being very honest about, just mental well-being. It's so interesting to see how we've cycled, like 15 years ago, leaders didn't admit weakness, they didn't kind of act like, they were struggling, but this is I love the growth mindset around how our leader styles are evolving, and our leaders have been very honest. I've been blogging about like how the Morris household is managing our stress levels. I have kids who are trying to do schoolwork at home. And so leaders are being very open about managing mental health and self-care. And we had a mental health week and a wellness week, and every day there were notes coming out with different resources, and there's an app, and there's, all different ways that you can get support and help. And that I think the key message here is, let's talk about it and be open about it, because people shouldn't have to struggle in the corner if they're having, trouble with their mental health right now. I think if everybody's struggling with mental health right now, it's a tough time. And I just think the more open we can be about it as leaders, you role model that. And then again, can we help provide resources so that people then know where to go to get some additional support?
Isn't that just beautiful? That is amazing. And you are right, Tina. When we look back over the past decade, 2 decades, our first in the scene, leadership going from a place where maybe talking about these things was a bit of a taboo to a place where leadership is volunteering to talk about these items, and what a huge impact it can have when the leadership is open and honest about it, as you just said. I really appreciate, Tina, you being so open and amazing. And maybe one last question to both of you, if that's all right. I mean, I know that we've gone through a big crisis, and it's been really sad and tough on everybody. But, I mean, was there a silver lining, or have you had any proud moments? Or maybe I should ask, what was your proudest moment over the past 2.5 months? Maybe, Dina, if we start with you, if that's all right?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me it's a couple of things. One, it'd be amiss if we didn't talk about people. I think the way people have come together, the way they're supporting each other, the kind of, even not just at the leadership level, even amongst teams, we're seeing a real kind of empathy kicking in, and people just reaching out to each other and checking they're okay and how can they help each other. And that's always been there, but I think it's really ramped up over the last few weeks and months. where people are caring about each other's sort of physical and mental well-being, not just the work that they're producing and whether they're on track about it. So seeing that come out has been a huge success for me. I think the other piece is we're actually seeing people think differently about what they do and how they do it as well, and being open to changing that in the current circumstances, and seeing how people are actually innovating a little bit. So if we look at our organization now compared to where we were a few months ago, I think we're already seeing differences in how people are operating, and that's everything from how they partner to how they think about their processes and their work. And that's actually spurring some really great ideas and great examples of how we're actually making the most as we can out of something like the pandemic we've seen, and using that to actually drive some meaningful change as well at the same time.
Wow, amazing. Thank you. That's great. And Tina, did you have something, maybe there was a proud moment, or what was the proudest moment?
It's funny because I don't know that I can put my finger on one, but I will. I'll tell two quick stories. One's work related and one's personally more personal. The first is I just think the word that comes to my mind is care. Every day I see multiple moments of people caring for each other and caring about what they do at work, and that's an interesting one because sometimes in times like this, you sort of question purpose a little bit. And so I've seen a real caring for what, people about what they do. And for S&P, what we're trying to do to help the market navigate this difficult time with, having as much information people can use out there. So I just love how people are caring for each other and caring about what they do. And they're showing a lot of resilience around both. And there are just moments every day in that. Personally, I would just say that I'm really proud of my kids, and they inspire me. I think children are amazing in how they, get up every morning and always see the bright side of life. And so when you were talking about positive, framing, I get a lot of energy and positive energy from my kids. It could be your kids. It could be a pet, like unconditional love of your dogs every day. Just, I find strength every day in those relationships or connections that are positive. And for me, it's been my kids and having more time with my kids.
Amazing. I have to confess that I'm the same, Tina, because I've got a 4-month-old baby, and to him, nothing has changed in this world because this is all he's known. Both mommy and daddy home, and every day he wakes up, and there is, in a way, it gives me so much inspiration to just frame it like that for myself, that this is the new normal and just get on with it.
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
I have to say a big thank you to both of you, Tina and Dina. It has been most amazing to have you on the call, and I think really gave all of us a lot of inspiration. I'm sure everybody joins me in thanking you for your time. And now we are open to, so if I say thank you to Dina and Tina, now we're open to any questions from, we've got 52 people on the line. Any questions, please either type it in the question box or let Heather have it. Heather, have we had any questions yet?
None have come through from the live audience as of yet.
But you have
time for one or two, and then
one or two. Yes. I mean, Dina and Tina, I know you're busy, so thank you very much. Of course, feel free to stay with us. Otherwise, I just can say a big thank you on behalf of everybody.
Well, thanks for having me. I do have to drop to something else, but I really appreciated the opportunity and love all the content. So thank you. I've learned a lot this morning.
Excellent. Thank you. And Dina, to you too, a big thank you to you for your time.
No, thank you. This has been great. We've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Right. So if you have any questions, Heather, let me know, please.
One question I have here is, why do you think many companies are still not investing in creating a culture of continuous improvement?
Heather, that's a great question I've been asking myself every day. Before any of this happened, sometimes it was an uphill struggle to do culture of continuous improvement or create culture into continuous improvement in companies. Many companies invested a bit, but at the end of the day, it wasn't enough. Sometimes it was just pretending, and it was so sad and disheartening to see that. Now, since the crisis has happened, unfortunately, since it has happened, I wish it had happened sooner. The change in culture, not the crisis. We've seen companies flocking to do aspects of it, and they often want the result of it, except unfortunately it's not overnight, and it takes, like everything else in life, it takes time to build up. It is very good that we're seeing that companies are absolutely flocking to do the right things now, like creating those dashboards that Tina and Dina were talking about, like compassion and empathy for their employees, because we're realizing this is the only way forward. And I have to say, unfortunately, in change management, we know that often, the biggest initiative, instigator of change, is having that burning platform. And I think COVID-19 has created the burning platform.
Yeah, definitely.
So sometimes I'm ashamed to have a career in that, because these things are absolute basic. They're not something that you want to go around and advocate. They're so obvious, but it is unfortunately the situation we're in.
Yep. So I think that's all we're going to have time for, unfortunately. I could just sit here and ask you questions all day. So interesting to listen to your insights. So I just want to say a thank you to yourself, Keivan, and also to Tina and Dina for joining us today, and of course to all our listeners. We would welcome your feedback on today's webcast, and thanks for listening. Keivan, do you have any last words?
That's all. I know that we're running out of time, and I'm grateful for everybody's time and insights.
Thank you very much, everyone.
The best.